And welcome back, college hockey fans. It's another episode of NCHC on MNCAA, along with Max Veech. I'm Nick Maxson. A lot of news to talk about in the NCHC this week, Max, where it's going to be a pretty quiet upcoming weekend. Again, happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there in the college hockey landscape. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Max, and to your family as well. Let's just say this, the appetizers, the chips and salsa for, say the Bulldogs were not good. St. Cloud came away with a split weekend, although they do take 4 of 6 points. We'll break that down first and then maybe talk some other big NCHC news that happened this past weekend. So with that being said, Max, let's talk Bulldogs and Broncos to get started. Let's just say it this way, not the best weekend, but there are some silver linings here, although you have to kind of get into some of the details to find those.
Yeah. I expect it to be a relatively short episode this week, not only because of the lack of games to kind of preview, but just the lack of takeaways that I've got from this past weekend here. I don't know what I was watching on the UMD sideline there, side of the rink anyway. They seem to be the better team on that Friday night game, and you see a 2-5 loss sitting in the final column there, and one would sort of think, how is that possible? And it's just, it can't be bad luck, but it's one of those things where it just wasn't going their way. It was honestly, if you watched, and we're recording this on Tuesday the 26th. I say yesterday, if you watch the Minnesota Wild and the Winnipeg Jets game that just recently happened here, it was a very similar vibe to that, where UMD had the majority of opportunities, 44 shots to 21. The blocks were essentially even. UMD was winning more faceoffs. They just weren't finding the puck luck and getting it into the back of the net. And credit to Connor Hellebuck, and then credit to, I think it was Cameron Rowe on that Friday night game. Yep. Just played out of his mind and deserved the win. But eventually that's got to start breaking. We just need to keep the guys motivated to keep getting those opportunities for it, to start swinging their way and not just kind of give up and play a different style of game and be a little bit looser with the puck. So good things I think will eventually happen. They just certainly didn't happen this past weekend. Positives, I guess, Zam Plante ends up scoring 2 goals on that Friday game there, 1 a power play, 1 regular strength. The Max Plante assist and him coming back to the lineup there was a real shot in the arm. I think especially for him, he's a different player when his brother's out there, or when they're both out there, they're different players. They complement each other so well. And I think everybody that's kind of involved with UMD and reporting on them and everything else has been enamored with that story, but for good reason this year. It's not just one of those things that's like, oh, it's cool to see brothers out there. These brothers play well together and kind of elevate one another as well. So that was good to see. I think there's more of that to come. But again, talking about some of the stuff that didn't go their way on Friday, the 5-minute major called, 2 or 3 minutes into the game on Western Michigan, and 10 seconds into that, UMD gives up the puck, and it takes only a couple seconds for Western Michigan to go down and score a shorthanded goal. So giving up the first goal of the game, bad. Giving up the first goal of the game shorthanded, bad. Giving up the first goal of the game shorthanded on a major. It doesn't get, it does get more embarrassing than I've seen it be more embarrassing than that, but it's a tough one to kind of gain momentum after, regardless of how you kind of rebound. Like I said, Zam comes up with a power play goal on that shorthanded or on that major opportunity there. But it just wasn't enough to give him the shot in the arm to keep it going. And there's a couple of other things in that game too that I wasn't really a fan of, and it's been a long historical run of me questioning the referees' abilities in the NCHC for the last couple of years here. But Max Plante's first collegiate goal called back, despite the fact that it was eerily similar to North Dakota's goal, where you had a goaltender who was covering the puck from the referee's point of view, except for when North Dakota poked it in under Adam Guyon, totally okay because the ref was moving and hadn't blown his whistle yet. When the ref hadn't blown their whistle, when Max Plante does it, and it was under or in front of Cameron Rowe's pad, he hadn't blown the whistle, but he had intended to blow the whistle. And it's just like, this is the same situation. It's just going against UMD in both scenarios here. So that was super frustrating for me personally. And then on top of that, you see a guy like Dominic James, who's trying to give his team a shot in the arm, a little bit of energy, whatever, kind of going coast to coast. And there's already a delayed penalty being called, and Western Michigan kid, I forget who it was, ends up, leaving his leg out there a little bit longer, a little knee on knee contact, completely overlooked, and no call on that one. Whether or not it would have been a major, another penalty for just tripping or what have you, that turns a 5-on-3 opportunity where UMD could, theoretically make a nice comeback when they were only down 2 at that point, I believe, to something where, their power play is, average efficiency, 23% upper middle class, I guess, into something where, they're not going to have that same opportunity. It's a much steeper hill to climb. So a couple of frustrating things on Friday, both on both sides of the puck there. Again, I don't want to take anything away from Cameron Rowe. I think he's incredible goaltender for him, but a tough result nonetheless. And then Saturday was, similar, more of the same. I would say that UMD might not have had the edge and competitive advantage of that one, but they didn't, roll over and just give the series up either. The shots, blocks, faceoffs, everything was relatively even throughout. The goals, again, were not. I think, UMD finally scores first. No goals in period 1, so that was, a positive for UMD. UMD scores first, positive for UMD. But they lost all momentum. There was another major penalty called on UMD there, and Western scores 2 on that power play, or technically 3 power plays, because it starts over after every one of those goals, which, for the record, I think is incredibly stupid way to keep stats. But I get it. If you are, a team that scores 3 goals on a major power play, you can't go 3 for 1. The math doesn't work out, whatever. But I think it just alters some stats for or against a team more than it really should. Anyway, but I digress a little bit here. That changed the whole outcome of the game, in my opinion, and that's 4 games in a row that UMD has had a major penalty called against them, and it's determining the outcome of some of these games for sure. Obviously, it didn't really impact the Miami series with them getting 2 wins there and on the Mangini and Joey Pierce penalties there. But when we're talking about the maybe a makeup call for Pierce on Friday of this past weekend, and then Carter Loney's penalty on Saturday certainly changed it as well. It's just one of those things that they need to quit doing. I would say Carter Loney's was a bit questionable. The head contact was, I've seen people turn their head harder and get more of a whip than what had happened there. Was there a little bit of a jersey that caught the front bar of a face mask? Sure, I guess, but there was no violent, collision. There was no intent to injure or any of these other things. So it's all subjective. Totally understand it. I've done enough complaining about referees. They've got a difficult job, and it's much like a food review when you go on Yelp or any of these other review things. Nobody has anything good to say. It's always just people complaining about it. That's what I feel like right now. Just had to kind of get it off of my chest a little bit there. But yeah, long story short, the weekend vibes, major penalties, absolutely killing UMD. Max Plante coming back changes both plants for the better, I think. And the UMD ceiling is back up to probably where it was at the beginning of the year. But more so than anything, I do think that we highlight those Western Michigan goaltenders. I think either one of them could be a Mike Richter candidate if both of them were combined into one person. Shout out to the Dragon Ball Z fans; they do some general fusion there and become one. I think they could be, even if the skills don't improve, they just have one name. It could be a Richter candidate for sure. But I'm of the opinion right now. I'll come out and say it. I think both Western Michigan goaltenders should be up for that award right now, and I would be curious to see if that's ever happened in college hockey before. If you've got 2 goaltenders from the same team, at least making that top 10 list. They don't have to make it to the final 3, but I think both of them deserve it for sure.
And Max, I want to stick with the penalty talk, right? Because when you have a young squad that UMD does, in your opinion, is it a disciplinary issue where it's, where guys are, they're losing their cool, there's some frustrations? As you mentioned, it's easy, I think, also when, you take Friday's game, for example, and, you know, you're outplaying your opponent. You're not getting the bounces. I get it. The emotions running high. Or is it where these penalties are because they're chasing the game a bit? The stick gets up. It's one of those just incidental type things. You know, which do you think is really, I mean, granted, they're major penalties. So I think I know where it's going, but do you think there's a discipline issue amongst UMD and their players right now? Because again, as you mentioned, the last 4 games, that's hurt them a bit. And I do think it's worth at least having a discussion because, I mean, it sounds obvious, right? But especially for a young team that's trying to get themselves established, especially some of these young forwards and D for UMD, you can't make that road any tougher than it already is. So do you feel like there is some issues there that have to be discussed amongst the coaching staff to the roster about just being a little bit smarter in terms of staying out of the box?
I think certainly some of them, I would say half of them have been maybe not disciplinary issues, but boneheaded. None of them were on purpose. We don't have anybody going out there like two-handing, breaking a stick over the back of somebody's ankles or anything like that. So it's not
No Donald
egregious penalties.
Cheer and no
Yeah.
Yeah, well, who was the why can't I think of his name? The guy that cross-check, the guy that played in Vancouver for a while.
I thought you were going to say Jared
Bertuzzi.
Spurgeon when he did it.
Bertuzzi. Oh, Spurgeon. That was wasn't that the guy from Chicago? Wasn't that Duncan Keith?
I don't remember who it was. It was in the playoffs just a couple of years ago. His wires got crossed and just did it on his ankles. But none of that's happening. To bring it back around here, it's just some of the things where one, you get a bad angle on, you know, a check like that Loney one. I think it's literally just bad camera work or whatever. Nobody got injured. Again, not any intent or whatever. It's just bad luck, bad positioning, whatever. I think, you know, Joey Pierce, especially in the Miami series on that Saturday game, you know, there's a little bit more there in terms of just the better decision making in terms of what you can and can't get away with. But yeah, it's probably a good mix of bad luck and bad decisions. Again, it's not anything where we need to sit down and have a conversation with benching a player at this point just because they're doing it too much. But it's one of those things that you just hate to see repeated over and over and over again. And you don't want to tell guys they have to be more careful because then you're second guessing stuff and you're opening yourself up to make, you know, hold on to the puck for an extra second or to, you know, take some of the physicality and grit that you probably have to lean on in some games out of it. And you don't really want to do that. But somehow Sandelin's got to get that message across to the players that we can't continue to put ourselves down, you know, for 5 minutes at a time and give anybody an opportunity, especially in NCHC play, to get up on us because frankly, UMD can't really play from behind anymore. And they've kind of proved that. Not saying they're incapable of coming back. I just think it's significantly tougher for a team of their build with how young they are and everything else to come back and regain leads versus, you know, play with the lead from the front. And that's how Sandelin wants to be playing the game anyway. So.
Right. I don't disagree with that. You mentioned Cameron Rowe. He was co-goaltender of the week along with Isaac Posh again, who makes that list. I don't even want to describe to you, Max, where I think this team meaning the Huskies would be without Isaac Posh. My goodness, he's been a rock star, to say it lightly. Was very key in terms of taking 4 of 6 points from the Tigers this weekend. I do think Isaac Posh, if this trajectory continues, would be in the conversation for the Mike Richter Award. I really do truly believe that. But again, I think just, you know, surface wise, had to be pleased with the effort in Colorado College. Again, an overtime loss on Saturday. It was one heck of a shot that was taken there by the defender. I'm trying to remember his name. Actually, I have it pulled up. That was in skates. Yeah, it's Philip Blaise Savoy. Who went sharp angle back bar out. It came out so quick. It was like one of those Austin Matthews type releases where they had to go back and look at it. It was clearly back bar and out. It was just in and out so quick, just incredible wrist shot. But CC played really, really well Saturday. And then Friday, St. Cloud getting up to a lead. You know, they were carrying a 3-1 lead most of that third period. CC caught it with a late goal with the goalie on the bench to make it 3-2. Huskies were able to run the clock down. Neutral zone and the zone entries on Saturday, there was no room for either squad. It was back and forth. There was no really possession time. Now, I will say that Colorado College really pushed hard in the third on Saturday's game. They really did hem the Huskies in to their own zone for really the last 6 to 7 minutes. So the Huskies able to push that to overtime again. Isaac Posh, no question about it. I will say this. If there's one thing that I'm concerned about with the Huskies beyond the power play, which is at a measly 13 some percent, is the veteran scoring. It just isn't there. Granted, and the biggest name that I think a lot of Huskies fans are on right now is Adam Ingram, and I think there's right to be concerned with him. He started off the season injured, kind of floated on a third to fourth line role. They've tried to move him up into a top 6 role, trying to get him going, and he just hasn't been able to find the back of the net. Mind you, he was their leading point scorer from last season, just has not been able to put it together. So that's a concern that I think Huskies fans have. But at the end of the day, if there are hockey gods listening, just keep your hands off Isaac Posh, please. Just keep him healthy, then we'll be fine.
Yeah. I would say, one of the questions I've got, and maybe you can elaborate this on a little bit more, just having watched, full games of theirs, is St. Cloud, just because most of the games I'm watching of theirs are relatively low scoring for the opponents anyway. Are they playing more tightly and forcing everything to the outside, or are they being more aggressive in terms of the pursuit of people that have the puck, whether it's on penalty kill or just, standard defensive play? Because it seems like a mix every time I watch, and I'm not sure what they're being coached at right now. And maybe it's just because I'm watching highlights only or lowlights only. And I just don't know what the true vibe of their defense is right now.
Really, from what I can see is for St. Cloud is they have two things that they want to do. One, they want to be aggressive at their own blue line. They really want to disrupt zone entries in terms of carrying the puck in. I think that's one thing they want to force their opponent to dump and chase. Because you got guys that can skate back there. Thor Bufflin, one of the freshman guys who's really taken the spot of Warren Clark, mind you, is a 6th round pick of the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's been essentially out of a job the last 4 or 5 games just because Bufflin's just been the better defender. But you put in guys like Cooper Wiley, Josh Key, they all can skate. And then Colin Ralph, the true freshman out of Shattuck St. Mary's with his size at 6'4", not the most fleet of foot, but he angles well. He's physical, makes really good reads, especially in the neutral zone. He can really transition the puck well. So I think it's a combination of both. I think they want to disrupt the entries, and then 2, they want quick exits. So they're really flying the zone in transition. They really want to get north quick. And they're happy with, even if they can't carry it in with a puck on their stick, they're happy just to go ahead, tip it in, go out and go to work. Their best line all year has been the Ryman, Rosborough, and Granite Sean line. They've been the tone setters. They've been the energy line. They're not just finishing checks, so they're going in, they're actually getting the puck back, they're forcing turnovers, they're getting offensive chances, and more importantly, they're allowing those top 6 guys to get some rest to establish a forecheck and then make a change on the fly, and then you've got your opponent hemmed. So defensively, that's really what it's been. Now, granted, if they're in their own zone, they do want to pressure the puck carrier, but they've really been packing it in. They've been really good at blocking shots, and they've really been wanting to protect Isaac Posh in terms of second and third chance opportunities. As we've seen with Isaac Posh, if he sees it, he's going to stop it. If there's one thing St. Cloud has done at times is they've puck washed a little bit, especially if the puck is behind the net, meaning below the goal line. I've seen that. And 2, I think also at times they've very rarely, but at times have over pursued the puck to on one side. And honestly, it's fixable, but that's the one thing that St. Cloud just got to be careful on. But overall, I mean, defensively, I think they're okay. Again, with Ralph there, he's learning, he's doing all right. I think as far as Lidkey and I think for Reiner's their top pair, that's their best pair so far, no question. But I would say if there's any one player that you have to keep an eye on is actually Josh Zinger from Northern Michigan. And he said it himself. I interviewed him a couple times pregame, and he mentioned that he's a forward turned defender, So he did the opposite. No, he was the Brent
Same
Burns
as Aaron
experience.
Pionk.
But I think sometimes he gets a little bit carried away offensively. And so if at the end of the day he's caught too low, there's some chances, odd numbers going back against St. Cloud. And
Sure.
teams like Bemidji have done it. Teams like Augustana have done it, where they figured out that if they've stretched the ice against St. Cloud in the neutral zone, if they just have these long stretch passes and they tip it in, St. Cloud has not done a good job as they've wanted to in terms of bottling that up, and also trying to disrupt that. They get caught kind of sagging back a little bit, then allowing space for them just to skate right off the ice. But overall, I mean, they're okay at the end of the day. Is there room for improvement there? Yes. But am I
Always
concerned? Right. Am I concerned? No. Again, there's some new bodies there. St. Cloud has a bit of, if you want to do comparatively speaking, a kind of an undersized defensive core in terms of, who they have. But I think they can get by because of this speed that they skate with. That's one advantage that they have, is that they can skate really well. So even if one over pursues, their forwards back pressure, they back check really well. They know how to backtrack through the middle of the ice. They usually can absorb some of those mistakes. But I do wonder, as you get towards February, March, those kind of things become a little bit more exposed, as teams also make you pay for those kind of mistakes down the road. So it's good, but is there room for improvement? Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, you saying, what they try and force defenders into doing makes me a little bit nervous for the last series of the year, and just anytime UMD is going to face them, because they've got this nasty tendency. And I understand the theory behind dump and chase and everything else, and it works out great if you have people that can take the puck back and be in the right position and everything else.
The
UMD
first
doesn't have
forehand
size,
is so
and they're learning. Yeah, so I can already see the trap coming in front of me, and I'm not enjoying the thought of it. But yeah, I'm excited for those series nonetheless. I think they'll be good.
They'll be fine. At the end of it, you and I both know, even going back to last year when UMD was in a different position than it is now,
Mhm.
it was still a very tight weekend. And in fact, let's go back to the last series of last year. You could argue UMD took St. Cloud out of a pairwise position to make the NCAA tournament. You really could.
Yeah,
Now, granted, they also didn't help themselves with some of the other results, especially in non-conference, and then the way that things turned for the CCHA. It's all
right.
one big conglomeration. We all know that. But as we both expect, and why we continue to be excited for those series, is both those coaches, again, from the same bench. They play a similar style of hockey, and despite who's playing on the ice, it always seems to be quite a grindstone between these two squads. So I'm always excited for it. In fact, first series between the both of us will be, I think, second weekend of January up at
Yeah.
Amsoil Arena, and then as we flip flop every other year, the last series will be at the Herb Ricks National Hockey Center. I think second week of March before the NCHC tournament gets underway. The last one that will be in the city of St. Paul, Max, which is hard to
Right.
believe. How about that, huh?
I was just in there this past weekend, or I guess on Monday for that Wild game, and I saw all the NCHC stuff in there, and they went through the whole process of adding Arizona State's logo up there and recentering everything and doing all the graphics. And I was like, oh, all this for 1 year? I would have just slapped the fork on there and said, good enough. This is not going to be worth the time and effort. But credit to those guys, and the whoever's doing the marketing up there for doing it right. But I had a little bit of a chuckle to myself at that point when I saw it.
Max, though, I'm glad you brought up the pitchfork, because the Sun Devils made quite a statement of their own this past weekend. They swept Denver in their own
Yeah.
building. It was Denver's first loss all year. And we were talking about this before the broadcast. I did not have this on my bingo card. I don't think you did either.
Not at all.
It's these kind of series that remind us that truly anybody can beat anybody. But we do have to ask the question, right? And that is this more on ASU or is this more on Denver? What do you think?
Oh, I think this has probably got more to do with ASU realizing their full potential, and Denver, maybe getting a little bit too comfortable with, a 12-0, 12-0 start to the season. So a culmination of the perfect storm a little bit. I don't think, and I haven't hand up. I haven't checked the stat sheet to see if Lucius has suited up for ASU yet, but I don't even think he was playing in this series. I know he's trying to make his comeback here, but if they're still doing that without what was supposed to be one of their best players coming into the season, they've got quite a potential trajectory in front of them, and a good thing for the NCHC as a whole, bad thing for UMD, being that that's going to be their next opponent here in 2 weeks. But yeah, they're a dangerous hockey team when they have everything firing on all cylinders, and they certainly figured out a way to do it this weekend. And that's one that will be revisiting here myself, just so I can figure out what I need to kind of expect. But they're getting hot at the right time.
Yeah, and I would say this. I mean, I did kind of a bit of a hot take before this season that I thought Arizona State would finish ninth in the NCHC. Mind you, I knew that was a bit of a stretch, but I wasn't very wrong up until this weekend. Now,
That's
granted,
true.
Miami is also unfortunately kind of hit their wall, which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this, Miami leads all college D1 commitments with 14 right now. So going back to Anthony Noreen, and we just like CC, right? We keep comparing them to the Tigers. It's going to take him time. He's already making his mark already. This is exactly how Colorado College started their turnaround. They got a massive recruiting pipeline started. They got another one today, I believe, also from Sioux Falls. Someone playing some youth hockey down there. So he's building that program up. They'll be back, but I'm with you. I think and I do kind of think it's more Arizona State than it is for Denver. Now, I think if you are Denver, I think you are glad it happened now, right? The longer it goes, the monkey just gets bigger. It just becomes more of a distraction. So I think if you're David Carl too, you're glad that it happened. Now, I think to both of us, one game probably was enough, but two in their home building, I think that's the bigger surprise. That I think the bigger question is, I mean, I think we're both comfortable thinking that Denver will respond in due time. But Arizona State, last year, they had over 20 wins, and they were yapping about how why they're not in the NCAA tournament. Well, we very casually pushed back and said, well, if you look at who you beat, you don't deserve to be there.
Right.
This is potentially, Max, and maybe I want to get your opinion on this. Is this really the first big statement win as a D1 program? I would think it is, just because, again, you're defeating number one in their building, and you don't just get them one night. You do it both nights. I think this is a welcome to the show for Arizona State, and good for them, honestly.
Yeah, the one I keep thinking of here is I don't remember if it was the USA Hockey Hall of Fame game or whatever it was. I think they were playing North Dakota in Vegas. Was it last year or 2 years ago? And they upset North Dakota when they were ranked as a top 5 or 10 team in the country. And I was making fun of them for wearing some glitter sparkle jerseys and this, that, and the other thing, and trying to be the Oregon of college hockey. And that was a statement win for me anyway, for them as a program. That was October 29th of 2022. So 2 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was probably their big first win. But when we're talking about, overall series, yeah, I think, winning against undefeated number one Denver, not once, but twice, is the biggest statement by all accounts. And I don't think anybody could really have an argument against that either. It's certainly the biggest surprise of the college hockey season, in my opinion. I don't think there's been another one throughout the rest of the country where a top 5 team has been swept by, at that time, an unranked opponent. And yes, I know ASU had received votes on the previous poll, but they weren't on either of them. So
nope.
Yeah, it's certainly something that is opening some eyes for sure. And again, I get called a homer or a ride for the NCHC, but there's a reason I do it. Every team that's in here can win outside of the conference. I mean, even UMD, who has struggled against every other ranked opponent that they've faced, they beat UMass Lowell, who is doing pretty well in the national rankings as well, and they looked really good in that Friday game of that series. So yeah, I think anyone in the NCHC could have a really good series against somebody that's not in there. And even, in the interconference play. One bad penalty can change a game, and one bad game can change the vibe for the next one or the series as a whole. So credit to them. They're doing something right. And I think if they continue to have success, it's going to only draw more positivity and good players to kind of join that program. So um, good for the conference for sure.
Can't disagree at all with any of that, Max. Let's do a quick recap of this past weekend just to get everybody caught up in case you'd missed it. How about this one? Also, North Dakota and Robert Morris, 2 1-goal games on Friday going to overtime.
Yeah.
North Dakota was able to sneak those both through. So, oh my goodness, that could have been, let's just say that could have changed some trajectories for North Dakota. That result gone a different way. Again, Omaha also finally finding their feet again, a 3-0 win over Miami Friday, and then 8-1 on Saturday. Really, the offense came out to play. Omaha really needed that weekend to go their way, as they've been kind of struggling as of late. We talked about Duluth and Western Michigan, as long with St. Cloud, and then touching on Arizona State and Denver. NCHC teams, again, because of the holiday, only 2 teams in action for this upcoming weekend. So this Friday, it's Western Michigan hosting Michigan, if Michigan decides to show up, no pun intended. And then North Dakota will travel to Bemidji State. That could be a pretty good series, Max.
Yeah.
Because Bemidji State, we know who they are, but they're playing it well. They're playing the territory style well. And North Dakota, just for whatever reason, they're not as scary as I think everybody thought they would be. Now, granted, it's still basically now December, so there's still time to right the ship. But UND just hasn't been as dominant as I think a lot of folks, including myself, thought they would be. Those are the 2 series in action for this weekend. One quick final thought from you, Max. What's wrong with North Dakota, really?
Legally, I'm not allowed to trash talk North Dakota. My team was swept by them in embarrassing fashion. So for me to sit here and pick apart a program that's been able to do that in our home arena over and over and over and over and over again would be a poor look. With that being said, I think others have a right to do that and should feel some.
You're going to put this on me, aren't you?
Some pretty cautious. Yeah, they should have some pretty cautious optimism, if any, because Robert Morris not only is a team that's struggling again right now, but they're at the bottom of Atlantic hockey of everybody that's in there. And they, like you said, took North Dakota to overtime one game, and it was a 1-goal game the next one over. And you don't see a ranked opponent, let alone a team like North Dakota, in those types of games all that often. And this goes against everything I just said in that ASU and Denver recap, where anybody can win on any given weekend. There's I don't know if being facetious is the right way to put it, but there's some caveats in there where 90% of the time you know what's going to happen. But this was a different look from North Dakota, and I didn't understand what was going on. And there was a couple of friends I had in the arena there, and they were just kind of flabbergasted at what they were seeing. They could not figure out why the Fighting Hawks were unable to score, 1, but 2, why the play just seemed so disjointed compared to what they had seen in the past against UMD specifically, but against some other quality opponents as well. And it's not often you see a team come away with 2 wins on a weekend and drop in the national rankings, but when you do it against a team like Robert Morris, the way that North Dakota did, I can't argue with it either.
I will tell you what the issue is: defense and goaltending. Now, mind you, defense was a big question mark last season. They literally had 7 brand new defense, and that unit came together really well. Mm-hmm. They also picked up a goaltender this year by the name of TJ Semptenfelter, which I think, if I'm being just blatantly obvious, he hasn't been great. Now, he hasn't been terrible, but I don't think he's been the goaltender I think they went out and acquired. We'll put it to you that way. And then I think also with North Dakota, because they do rely, at least from the player's perspective, and granted, I'm just throwing stuff at the wall here, but I do feel like that team is an offensive first team, despite Brad Berry's commitment to defense, which And any coach is going to say that, right?
Mhm.
I kind of get the sense that they're almost, I don't want to say beating themselves, but they're not able to protect leads, one. And two, if they're not scoring, you can almost see it in the posture of when they play, is they tend to get a little tense. They tighten up. And I think you can see a snowball from those two. And I think the attitude is because they're not as confident defensively, I feel like the team feels that they have to produce more on offense, give themselves a cushion. That way they can absorb any sort of pushback that maybe their opponent may have. These low scoring games, now, if you want to look at the other fashion, is yeah, they came in with 2 wins. These are regardless of the opponent. You have to be able to have some composure, some patience there as well. So you could look at it that way too. But to your point, Max, I mean, Robert Morris, again, it's a team that's, first of all, glad that they're back.
Yeah.
Number one.
Same.
Number two, because of that, though, they just don't have the same talent level that the Fighting Hawks do. So on paper, it should have been a different story, but good on Robert Morris for making it close. And two, I think it is something to say that North Dakota was able to work through that and still pick up the 2 wins. But am I wrong about defense and goaltending, do you think?
No, I certainly don't think you're wrong, and this has been a lingering issue, or strength for North Dakota for the last, I think it's 4 years in a row, if not five, where they've picked up a goaltender out of the transfer portal or somewhere else, and just it either gels or it doesn't. And I can't remember who they had grabbed from.
Miami.
Um, yeah, um,
Let me look that
Pearson,
up while you, yeah,
Pearson,
Ludwig.
Ludwig Pearson.
Yep.
And
So then it was,
Bemidji.
yeah, why can't I think of his name? Was it, oh, it was Driscoll, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep. Hmm.
And so some of them work out and some of them don't. And realistically, it kind of gets a game by game basis. And it's weird to say that it's going to take some time to gel because the goaltender is such a standalone position where you don't really rely on anybody else. But if you're playing in a different system entirely, where you're used to taking shots from the side rather than directly from the point, and not having to deal with traffic, or vice versa, or you're dealing with a different skill level. I think Wisconsin's having that right now, where their goaltender that they pulled out of RIT is maybe not used to the same level of skill and or lack of defense that they're seeing in the Big Ten. But bringing it back to North Dakota, it's one of those things that you never know what they're going to get from year to year when you continue to bring in these random goaltenders. I think of a team. One way to do it is what North Dakota is doing, and one way to do it is what Western Michigan is doing. And they've got their succession plan lined out for the next at least 4 years, ideally, with Rowe and Slukinski kind of splitting time throughout the rest of the year this year, and then Slukinski being a freshman. He takes over the role, and they try and bring in another top end goaltender, in 2 years, when he's going to be able to be, coaching them up and splitting time, maybe on his way out. And I don't know. I'm a little bit jealous. I thought we were going to have that in Guyon this year, and we still might. I think he's got room to improve, but still has been the best player on the team, probably week in and week out. And I ramble a little bit here, but the train of thought is just chugging, and I want to get it all out there. So back to North Dakota. Yes, defense is certainly an issue. I think goaltending is probably the bigger question mark night in and night out, but the last one I wanted to talk about here, now that we've brought up defense and I've talked bad about the Big Ten already, Michigan versus Penn State. I cannot get enough of these games that they continue to play year in and year out. These two, when they're playing each other, Penn State refuses to not shoot the puck regardless of what they are or where they are, and Michigan is just a dominant force, and they'll go 4 guys down below the hash marks and try and just run the score up, and it's a crazy score every game. Saturday 10-6. That's a Big Ten football score. That's Wisconsin and Iowa.
I was just going to say.
It's crazy the amount of goals that they're putting up. So when people are saying, "Oh, you can't just say the Big Ten doesn't have defense. It's not just a scoring." Like, well, prove me wrong. Prove me otherwise, because it seems every year we get some of these scores, and they always seem to be coming out of the Big Ten matchup. So I'm not going to say I don't enjoy them. But it's certainly a different style of hockey than I'm used to watching. either at the professional level, but also in the NCHC. So just one I had to point out there. If anybody's looking for a highlight reel, just go watch that whole game. It seems like there was a goal every 5 minutes. So fun, but interesting.
Are you not entertained? But also, Max, to your point, the Big Ten, how many national championships has that conference had?
Yep.
You don't have to look far. It's 0. So with that being said, we will waste 0 more of everybody's time. We do appreciate every single one of you that listens and watches us on YouTube throughout the season. We want to say from our family to yours, happy Thanksgiving to all of our college hockey fans that are out there. For Max Veech, I'm Nick Maxson. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll be back with you next week for more NCHC and MNCAA.